everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Homestand, the official podcast of the Kansas City Royals. I don't know about you, but I am ready for baseball. In 2023, there's no better way to kick this off than with our guest today, JJ Picollo. Thank you so much for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
It is so exciting to be chatting with you. It's so exciting to be talking about baseball in 2023, is it not?
Well, when you got the sun behind you like this, it's outstanding. So it's a good sign that baseball's around the corner. So yeah, it's always a fun time of year. Start of spring training is great.
Yeah. Now, I know you do a lot of interviews and you get asked a lot of really tough questions, and there's a lot of moments where it can be really hard to be the guy in your shoes. I want you to take a deep breath. This is going to be a fun interview. We are going to learn more about you as a person, your career, your job, all those things. I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in the minutia of the fact that you have a position, but you're also a person, and you've had a journey to get to where you are, and we're going to talk about some of that today.
Okay, great.
So get ready for it. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about the fact you're an East Coast guy.
Yep.
Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Tell me about Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Well, it's a suburb of Philadelphia, actually, and
Okay.
I grew up in South Philadelphia, Southwest Philadelphia, went to school in South Philadelphia, so right where all the stadiums are, and I was a diehard Philadelphia fan in all the sports, but middle school, we moved to New Jersey. Actually, the same month that the Royals played the Phillies in the 1980 World Series, we moved to Cherry Hill. So it's, really 10 minutes, on the other side of the bridge. So it's a small town, kind of blue collar, actually very similar. I feel very comfortable in Kansas City because it feels a lot like home.
Yeah.
But it was a great place to grow up.
Your accent, it's not bad, but sometimes it comes out when you say my name with the A's.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that with Carrie, Barry.
Yeah.
My kids remind me all the time.
It's not bad. It's really not bad.
Yeah.
Every once in a while it comes out, but I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
you're from. You still have family there?
I do. They all still live in Cherry Hill and in some town. My brother moved just outside Medford, New Jersey, about 20 minutes away. Aunts, uncles, they're all still in the area. Actually, the interesting thing is when I was growing up, everybody was moving out of the Philadelphia area into New Jersey. Now my cousins are tending to move back into the city. So the move's back into the city. So, but all still in that area. Really, I'm the only one that sort of flew the coop.
And here you came to the Midwest, which we love having you here, of course. Tell us some about college. You went on, and still on the East Coast, NC State.
Yep.
And then George Mason.
George Mason, yeah.
So stayed on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Tell us some about that.
Well, I played baseball in college and got the opportunity to go to NC State. Played there for 2 years. Played well my first year. Didn't play so well my second year. And we like to call it the relocation program. They moved me on out and went to another school. But finished my last 2 years at George Mason and had a great time. Actually met my wife there at George Mason. A lot of lifelong friends. So I was really fortunate to find a place where I landed on my feet, enjoyed playing baseball, and got a small opportunity afterwards to play.
Was that always your thought process in high school? Did you think I'm going to get to go and play baseball? Like, what was your goal in high school?
Oh, yeah. No, I from the time I was a kid, I played all the sport. Well, at that time, all the sports was basketball, football, baseball. But I didn't focus on baseball really until my senior year in high school when I realized my future was more baseball.
Yeah.
I got drafted out of high school, came close to signing, chose to go to NC State. But yeah, my dream was always to be a major league player, and you always think that's going to happen and you're always working towards it. And then somewhere, when you're 23 years old and I had some back and elbow issues and you're starting to realize I'm probably not going to play in the major leagues. I got to start thinking about something else. And coaching was my next step. So I was fortunate to stay in the game and be given the opportunity to coach.
Who drafted you, and was that a conversation you had to have with your parents?
So my parents are both school teachers, and they had no interest in me signing a professional contract. And at that time, $100,000 was sort of the going rate. That was if you got $100,000, you were doing very well. So they made a deal with me that if you get $100,000, we'll let you sign. So long story short, the Cincinnati Reds drafted me. I was supposed to be a higher pick and slipped in the draft. So they were watching me throughout the summer. And I remember my last American Legion game, which American Legion baseball has kind of gone by the wayside. But my last American Legion baseball game, the scouting director for the Cincinnati Reds, Julian Mock, the area scout, Ray Bellino, came to my game. I played well. We sat on a park bench. I was by myself without my parents. I didn't have an agent. And they were offering about $85,000. And I said, you know what? We may need to take this conversation to my house because I need my parents' consent. And ultimately, my parents said the deal was $100,000. So So I ended up going to NC State about a week later. And, really don't have any regrets about it because I have a lot of great friends that I made at NC State, still stay in touch with 5 or 6 of them. Great experience there. We went to NCAA regionals. We were a game short of getting to the College World Series. So it was a great experience for me anyway. And then ultimately it led me to George Mason.
The restraint that you have, if I were 17 years old and someone sat me down and said, I will give you $85,000, I'd have been like, I don't need mom and dad. So where can I sign?
If I remember right, they had to sign as well. And I don't think I was going to get them to sign.
Well, kudos to them for sticking to, what they had said. That's a tough negotiation, but it also gave you something to aim for too, didn't it?
Yeah, it was. And looking back on it, I have a much better perspective now. And I understand why they felt the way they did, have no regrets about it. I joke with them about it. Who knows what if I had signed, what would have happened? They said, well, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now, more than likely. So it's funny how life takes you down different roads, and ultimately led me to the Royals.
And I'm sure you understand their thinking now as a parent yourself, going through those thoughts with your kids and whether they're going to college or whatever they're doing. But what our parents tried to, push us into or tried to hold us back from, it makes more sense once we get older, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. They get wiser. As we get older, our parents get wiser.
Yeah.
So they were on it.
Yeah. So you said coaching and taking that next step when you kind of realized that maybe playing wasn't going to be your long-term, path. What was that thought process like? Was it something where you're like, I'm going to do this right away, or did you think about it some? Like what went through your head?
No, I ended up, I got drafted again by the Reds. Same scouting director, drafted me again 3 years later. I chose not to sign again. That time it was all my choice, not to sign. And then the following year I went back for my senior year. Played 1 year in the Yankee system. I got drafted. I went undrafted, signed after the draft. But there I met Rob Thompson, who's the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies now. He was one of the coaches on the short season team I was with. And he was the catching instructor, and that was the position I played. So we developed a good relationship then. And at the end of the summer, I was offered a chance to be a graduate assistant at George Washington University, which I felt was the right thing for me. And I sat down with Thompson. Thompson was trying to talk me out of it. He said, look, I don't know if you're going to play in the major leagues, but if you want a career in baseball, you should continue to play.
Yeah.
Come back to spring training because you're going to make a team. You don't need to worry about that. You'll make a team. But when I really evaluated a chance to get my master's degree at a great university, get my feet wet as a coach, I just thought it was too good to pass up. And ultimately, I took that opportunity. Scott Sharp, our assistant GM, would give me a hard time. I didn't actually retire because if you don't play long enough, you're not actually retiring. So I quit. But I went to George Washington, which is right, obviously in Washington, D.C., and had a great time there. 2 years, learned a lot. Jay Murphy was the head coach. He gave me a lot of opportunity from recruiting, coaching catchers, coaching hitters. And it really, at that point, I thought I want to be a head coach in college. That's what I want to do. So that transition was kind of seamless for me because, again, I knew where I was as a player. Yeah. I understood the end was near, but this was a chance for me to start on a new path. Yeah.
Do you still keep in touch with that same guy who drafted you twice? That says a lot about you as a person that you said no, and then he came back and was like, we want you again.
Well, one of those scouts, this is kind of odd. So the Cincinnati Reds, when you go from New Jersey down to North Carolina, the area scout in North Carolina came by and said hello. His name is Paul Falk. Ironically, Paul Falk, by the time I was leaving George Mason, was with the Yankees, and Paul's the one who signed me, who ironically also signed Matt Quatrero. So we did not know that going through the interview process, but Paul Falk gave me a call a couple days later and said, hey, you hired Q, that's great. I said, how do you know Q? He said, I signed him.
What a small world.
Yeah, it was really, really odd. But Paul Falk, he's still scouting with the San Francisco Giants, and I'm thankful. And he ended up being my first supervisor when I went to scout. He came over to the Braves, and I ended up being he was my supervisor. Yeah. I had an area, he was a cross-checker, so I spent a lot of years working with Paul as well.
Now, you mentioned before coaching. I wanted to coach. But what you're doing right now isn't necessarily coaching. So somewhere, the paths diverted and one opportunity led to another, and it led you more down the baseball ops road. But at the time, coaching was so appealing to you. Why was it so appealing to you?
Well, I love being on the field. Okay. I love the competition. I love seeing players get better. I don't know if I was any good as a coach, but I enjoyed it every day, and I gave him everything I had. The college world and coaching is very different than coaching here in professional baseball. Recruiting's involved, working with parents and making sure that they feel comfortable with where their son's going, and even when they're there, that they're comfortable. It's different. Here it's 100% baseball.
Yeah.
We still have relationships with parents, but it's very different than when you're coaching in college. So I just enjoyed being on the field. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to get back in uniform with the Royals and be a field coordinator, which I loved. And it was great because I had a lot of great coaches around me, and I was more coordinating, putting schedules together, not specifically coaching hitters or catchers, but I was back in uniform, and that was a lot of fun as well.
For some reason, I feel like there's a lot of catchers who play, and that for some reason translates into being a good coach. A lot of them here even, have been catchers.
Yeah.
You were a catcher yourself. What is it about that position, do you think, that helps you be a better coach?
Well, this is kind of funny. So my grandfather, who didn't play baseball, I remember I was 7 years old, you're playing t-ball and you're standing in the outfield and you're picking dandelions and all that stuff. He said, you need to catch because you're the only guy. And he was, ironically, a Cincinnati Reds fan and Johnny Bench. He said, Johnny Bench gets to see the entire field. You're the only one facing the field. Yeah. And it kind of stood out with me. I was 7 years old, so however 45 years ago. I still remember him saying that to me. And once I got back there catching, of course in t-ball there's nothing to do with catching, but once it became kid pitch, I started catching right away, and that's all I ever really did. I probably played maybe 10 games at first base, maybe 2 or 3 in left field or third base, but every other game I was catching, and it just gives you that perspective. The ball's hit to the fence, right center field, left center field. You see all the action behind. You see the shortstop and second baseman going in a double cut. You see what's happening with the third baseman and the first baseman. You're the only guy on the field that has that perspective. And I was reminded of that. A coach that we had who was an outfielder, who was a manager, first time managing, he played his outfield his entire career. And I said, what's the hardest part for you? He said, I don't know what's going on behind me. Mm-hmm. And now as a manager, I have to see what's going on behind. I have to stop watching the ball. I have to see what's going on behind the ball.
Yeah.
As a catcher, you had that perspective every play.
Yeah, that's so interesting and so true. It's almost like a quarterback position, so to speak, because the pitcher rotates out. There's always a different pitcher, but the good catchers, even you see Salvi, he controls the game. Yeah. But, he's kind of there quarterbacking, for lack of a better term, and the good ones are really able to do it in a way where, like, when the catchers got it all going on, we're doing fine.
Yeah. Well, and you have that pitcher catcher relationship too, so you feel like you are a coach on the field. Yeah. I mean, the pitching coaches, the managers, they have their cues that they're going to verbally tell the pitcher, but you have the ability right there all the time to have that communication with them. So you do get a little bit of a feel what it's like to manage a game as well.
So I want to talk more. You were in college doing your college things, got your master, like you said. And when did you make the transition to pro ball? Because as you said, there's a big difference between the two, coaching at that college level and then moving in, to working in pro ball.
Yeah, so I was, I'd spent the 2 years at GW. Then I went back to George Mason and coached for 3. And it was during those years, and when you're coaching in college, you're recruiting, so you're running in the same circles as the scouts are, the 30 major league teams. So I had to develop some relationships along the way, start asking questions. Why do you enjoy this? What's the upside with scouting? But it really wasn't until I was about to accept a job at East Carolina University as the associate head coach, and I got a call from Dayton Moore. And he said, hey, look, we have a scouting job open. We got a scouting school that's going on in Florida next week. My wife and I were in North Carolina on vacation. We were planning to go to Greenville, North Carolina, so she could see East Carolina's campus. And I ended up calling that head coach back and said, hey, I got an opportunity to go to a scout school, and it's a friend of mine, and I think I need to at least hear what they have to say. And after 2 days of a 10-day program, I said, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
The tough part was, from a financial standpoint,
less money.
I would have been a lot better off. And my wife was 9 months pregnant with our first child. So trying to explain to Nicole why we're taking a $27,000 a year job versus 80 or whatever it was not the easiest conversation. But what it did do, it allowed us to stay close to family. Yeah. So instead of moving to North Carolina, we were in Northern Virginia at the time where Nicole and her mother lived. And we eventually moved to New Jersey. So there were some benefits, but financially it didn't make a whole lot of sense. But from a career standpoint, it made sense to me. And I just have always had this attitude, whatever you are, be good at what you're doing, let things take place, and just trust that you're doing the right thing. And ultimately it was the right thing for our family.
Now, in just like the 2 or 3 stories you've told me, it's apparent to me, and just in the little bit I know you as a person, you have a really strong intuition. I mean, when it comes to not playing, that was an intuition call. Your buddy told you, he's like, you're going to make a team, just play. And something told you not to. And then with this job as well, like going to your wife and saying that.
Yeah.
Intuition. I mean, where does that come from? That's such like an intangible thing.
Well, I never thought about it like that, but your heart kind of tells you what's right and what's wrong. And I've never made any decisions based on finances. It's just not. Happiness is more important than what your checkbook says. So I just have always lived by that. And fortunately it allowed you to just make decisions with a clear mind and not worry about things that aren't that important. But I like intuition better than, gut feel or whatever else you might say, but it's worked out pretty well.
When you say it like that, you make it sound so easy, but you got to give yourself more credit, because there are so many external things coming in, whether it's, mentors or parents or friends or just anyone else. So when you say it like that, you make it sound like, well, duh, but it's so hard to do it, and you've been able to do it.
Well, I think if you listen to the people that you trust, hear what they have to say. And the best thing for me, I've had people around me that tell me the truth. So it helps you have more clear thoughts, work through those tough decisions. But when you take all the information in and you listen well, you're not always going to make the right decision, but more often than not, I think you'll come out on top and at least not have any regrets.
Yeah, 100%. So you made that choice and started in scouting. You were starting your family very young at the time, and you've had a lot of different positions. What have you learned from all of those different things that have taken you to where you are now? Because you're not a scout anymore. I mean, but what you've learned there is probably still so helpful for you today. Yeah,
I've, again, been really lucky to be around a lot of really good baseball people, whether it's coaches or scouts. And the positions I had early on, so an area scout, you're almost like an independent contractor. I was at the time working for the Atlanta Braves, but the 29 people I was around were the other clubs in my territory. Rarely did I spend time with people in the Braves organization other than annual meetings, draft meetings, whatever it may be. So that's a very different job. But then once I got into the front office with the Braves, I was given the great advice of, hey, just sit back and listen. There will come a time where it's time for you to speak. So that first year when I got into player development, which I really, as a scout, I never really thought about, can I be a coach now on the professional side? I just figured my path was going to be scouting. But when I was given the opportunity to be the assistant director of player development with the Braves, we had a really good run going. We won 14 straight championships. I got exposure to guys like John Sherholtz, Hall of Fame general manager, Frank Wren, who went on to be a longtime general manager. Dayton was in the front office. But then more so in my specific job, times like this, spring training, we were around a lot of legendary coaches, guys who had developed Chipper Jones, Andrew Jones, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz, all those guys that are, either in the Hall of Fame or soon to be in the Hall of Fame. So it was hard not to listen. So I just sat in the back of the room and took it all in. And about a year and a half later, it started to feel like, okay, I have some things to contribute here. And it was just sort of a slow drip. And I was never in a rush to get anywhere, never had any real great aspirations to do this or that. I just figured, my path will be determined by the job that I do. And fortunately, we had a lot of success with the Braves, and other opportunities came. I feel like people need to take notes. This is like a master class on how to do, you know what I mean? Just listen, take it in. Never be in too big of a hurry. Whatever you are, be good at it. Like, you're dropping so much knowledge on for anyone, whatever field you're in, starting out in college. You want to be a nurse, you want to be a doctor, whatever you want to be. That's such great advice for anyone. Well, we want things to happen so fast. Yes. But life goes fast. So if you're just patient, there's plenty of, it's like going through it now with my oldest son's 23 and he's at a crossroads now. Am I going to keep playing or not? And he's talking about like real life stuff, which is great. You need to think about that. But it's don't speed it up. Yeah. You don't need to speed it up. You're 23 years old. Take your time with it. You'll know the right things to do and what path you may want to take, but let it come to you. Don't force anything. Yeah. I was just lucky to be in positions where I didn't have to force anything.
Yeah, but you stood back, you took things in, and then you were ready to produce when you needed to produce. So much of that is like being a baseball player in that clubhouse. You know, they start on the minor league side, and the goal is to just do your best every day. If that best gets a little bit better, eventually you get to the major league side, and then you do your best every day. And so there's so much of that translates for these guys even on the field.
Absolutely. And, you know, what's really difficult for minor league players is to not look what's ahead of them.
Yes.
You know, if you're an A-ball and you're a second baseman, you're looking at what the second baseman in AA is doing. And now you're looking at what the AAA second baseman. Somebody signs a long-term contract. Well, that's my position, so how am I going to fit? You can't get caught up in that. You just got to take care of today and keep getting better. You know, we don't like saying this a lot, but we'll say it. There's a reason there's 30 teams, and there's 780 players any given night that are the elite of the elite. We want you to be a Royal in the major leagues, but understand that your calling may be somewhere else, might be with another team. But if you get caught up in what's ahead of me, you're not going to take care of what's in front of you. And that's a message we consistently share with our players.
Which you did when you were with the Braves. You were taking care of things there, and then you made the jump over to the Royals. So there was a transition there. I'm sure at the time you probably thought you'd be with the Braves maybe your whole career.
Well, we had moved to Atlanta, and we were maybe 2.5 years into the move. Loved living in Georgia. The warm weather, we didn't have to deal with the change of seasons, all those things that when you grow up in the Northeast, you part of why I went to NC State, you know, it was same thought process. But then the opportunity came to go to Kansas City and be a part of something that was a total rebuild. The organization was going through some tough years. Mr. Glass wanted to make a commitment to scouting and player development. Our background, there were a handful of us that came from Atlanta. Our background was scouting and player development. But we just had a clean slate here, and we could build it out any way we wanted to build it out. It was an exciting time. It was intimidating, working with, at the time we probably had 150 employees on the scouting and development side, working with 150 people we really didn't know. There were a few that we had some relationships with. So it was different. And at the time, I was 06, so I was 36 and didn't have that much experience. But it was a lot of fun to do it and to plan how are we going to get from point A to point B, and what's our first step, what's our second step, what's our short-term vision, what's our long-term vision. So it was an exciting time. It was the August of 06 when I first came over, but it was really getting into spring training of 07 when that all took place.
Now, as you're doing all this, jumping through the next strat for your career, you have a family, you have a wife, you're having kids, and so you're trying to balance being a dad, being a husband, while also, having this job that's taking you all over the place. And I'm sure that this is a whole family thing. Your family now, you don't do it alone. Baseball is not something you do alone. Your whole family has to be in on it. So I'm sure that there was a conversation there in everything that's going on in your career.
Yeah, I'm fortunate because Nicole was very open-minded. She's very independent, which is important in this game because we spend so much time away from home. She loved being a mother and, was a school teacher for a number of years, but then once the travel came, kids getting sick all the time and just wasn't working out. But I had that support. But, what's neat about it is really when we moved to Kansas City, our oldest was in first grade and our youngest was 2. So they're Kansas Cityans. They've grown up in Kansas City, but they've watched the lows to the highs to the lows, and they live and die with every game. They love the Royals. So it's been a great family experience. It doesn't come without challenges. The kids were all playing sports. So, we reached a point, I forget what year it was, but we had one son playing in Arizona, one son playing in Texas, and it was the first time that one parent could at least be somewhere. And that was a hard time because you're always at the games. We had good families on the club, on the teams we played with. So it really wasn't, the kids didn't even know the difference. You feel like they're hanging on every game that you're at or not at. They didn't know the difference. They just liked playing. They enjoyed playing in the travel. But it comes with challenges because you're away from home a lot and you can't quite have this normal family structure that you like to have. And growing up again, a son, I had one brother, Kevin and our parents were school teachers. So it was family dinners every night, weekends off, summers off, and our lifestyle is completely different. So, but when you're doing what you love to do and your family supports you, you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, you talk about your family and the support from them and how important that was. How do you balance some of that with what you're doing? Baseball is a business, so you get to know the guys in the locker room. You get to know their wives, their kids. We see the little Grankies running around the locker room, and Dozier brings his kids in, and it's so cool to get to know those kids, and you get to know them as people. But it's also a business. So how do you balance that, knowing that they're going home to their families and their job here matters for their families?
Yeah. Well, it's a stressful job for the players.
Yeah.
You know, it's I don't think anybody, including myself, can understand the weight that's on players' shoulders every night, because they're judged so much on their performance that night, especially in the world of social media. They're going to hear about it. You can't avoid it. So part of our job is to make them as comfortable as they can possibly be. So doing things like allowing kids to be in the clubhouse, that's easy. You know, it is not a problem at all to have kids in the clubhouse. There comes a certain point prior to a game where, okay, we got a game to play in an hour and a half, whatever it is. But players understand that, but they appreciate that we're allowing families to be around. And if that frees their mind up and helps them manage their family lives, that's important to us.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you know, selfishly, it leads to performance.
Yes.
You know, so it's kind of this big loop that you kind of work through. But that's a big part of what we need to do and need to recognize. And that's something, you know, just talking to Matt Quattrero, I didn't know what the norm was in Tampa or what they would do, but you know, he's got 2 young kids himself, so he's wide open to having kids in the clubhouse and, you know, whatever's permissible on the field, you know, giving them that experience of being out on the field with major league players. You know, those kids are going to remember that for a lifetime. That's part of their childhood memories. You know, you think about it, 81 nights of the year, they're going to be away from home. So for the 81 nights that they are at home, it's nice to be able to provide just a little bit. And if it makes them happier, that's great.
Yeah. I want to hear some from you about what it's like scouting, seeing, drafting these guys when they're 17, 18, 19, 20, and then watching them grow as players, mature, and turn into men.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about this, you know, in the dugout last season about Hosmer and Moustakas and those guys, and they were so young when they came to us, and watching their careers develop and watching them have kids and become people.
Yeah.
It's got to be so rewarding.
It is, and you know, going through those years where we're winning in 14 and 15, and just to see the national stage that they stepped up on, it's hard not to reflect on whether it's being in Hosmer's house before we drafted him, talking to Moose when he hit 1 home run in the first half of his first year, and he thought his world was ending. You know, Haas going through struggles, and many others, but those 2 because they had reached the pinnacle of the game. And just watching how much the city revered who they were what they represented, how the national audience just took a absolute love in watching them play was very rewarding. But you know what? Just as rewarding are guys that maybe don't get to the major leagues, but you watch them work through their struggles, and you know that they're more prepared for life because of the things that we were able to do with them. We put a lot of emphasis on character and building men. That's an important part of what we do. I think players tend to come into our system a little bit more grown up than they were 15 years ago for whatever reason. Life, again, maybe moving faster than it did before. But it still doesn't mean they don't hit these moments. And I don't think we go a day, I don't go a day personally where there's not something you're thinking about with a player that may be non-baseball related, and how can we help?
Yeah.
You know, and I know our coaches, that's why we always talk about the managers are the backbones of our organization, talking specifically about our minor league managers, because they're dealing with them day to day, you know, the ups and downs and the struggles and, you know, the girlfriend problems, the family problems. I mean, all of those things come up throughout the year. And when you have good managers in your system, you're able to help those players get through the tougher times. And that's why we put so much time into who we have, you know, on our staffs.
Yeah. You bring up managers. I got to ask you about Q because, you know, jumping in, he's brand new, but I interviewed him and I've gotten to know him a little bit. There's a lot of similarities between you guys. Both his parents were teachers too.
Yeah.
So the teaching aspect is deep in his roots too.
Yeah.
And, you know, you guys crossed paths or had a mutual connection. You know, I feel like you guys are similar in a lot of ways. Does that contribute to having a good relationship?
Well, you know, there's certain relationships that are really important, and the general manager relationship's one of them. when we went through the process of interviewing managers, it wasn't necessarily about their baseball knowledge. That's important, but nobody that was in our final pool didn't have baseball knowledge. But it's how well do they communicate that knowledge, and how good do I feel about working with this person?
Yeah.
But there was a real natural conversation that took place from the first time I called Q on the phone, that really just got stronger and stronger through the interview process. We can talk about anything. He's very relatable. I think that's something that's going to really pay dividends for us with our players. Yeah. But that bond that we're starting to form, and it'll get stronger and stronger, we got off to a really good start. And that's where the comfort really was. The good thing for me was, I know I felt it in the interview, but we had a panel of 7 people. When the interview was over, they felt it as well. So he was connecting with not only like somebody with my background, but he was connecting with, our R&D department, performance science department, all these different departments we have. They felt that connection as well. So I think that speaks to, sort of his ability to communicate and relate to people. It's standing out, even spending a week here so far. His minor league background really, I think, is what has helped shape him. Yeah. And for where our team is and our timeline and how we think about development, he's the perfect fit for this group of players right now.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm excited to watch him get to work and get to work with the guys. You talk a lot about listening in this. How important is it for a leader to be a good listener? And I think that's such an aspect of leadership that you embody, and I think Q is going to embody as well.
Yeah, no, I think if I had to list out what are characteristics you need in great leaders, listening would be at the top or right near the top. Yeah. I mean, you have to hear what people say. It's not that, whether it's Q or myself, we have our thoughts. We've sat in seats where we weren't the leader of an organization or a team, and you're constantly thinking about what would I do in that situation. But the reason you have those thoughts and you have those convictions is because if you do a good job listening, you're getting to better answers. And, ultimately we're trying to make the best decisions we can on a daily basis. Yeah. And the only way you're going to be able to do that, regardless of the decision you're making, is to listen. What's the saying? Somebody told me this years ago. You never learn anything when you're talking. You don't want to sit in the front of a room and dominate the room. Yeah. We went through meetings the last couple nights. They were some of the best meetings I've ever been a part of because everybody was talking. Yeah. Q said very little. I said very little. The people that are going to be coaching, it was pitchers meetings, they were doing all the talking, and we were doing a lot of listening, but also a lot of learning. Yeah. And when you listen, you learn.
I would love to know what advice you would give your 20-year-old self.
Well, I had some great mentors, but I think looking back there's always some disappointments in your career. I interviewed for a couple jobs I didn't get. There were some jobs that maybe I was interested in that I wasn't considered for. Just in some ways, don't put too much into it. If you just really focus on what you're doing right now, there's a reason why you'll end up where you're going to end up. And if this job doesn't work out or that job doesn't work out, don't worry about it. Okay. And also, I've already spoke to this, but give it time. You don't have to move fast. And there were times, even though I felt like I managed it well, there were times you wanted things a little bit quicker. But when you start looking to the next job, you're not doing your current job well. And there were times in my career that I didn't manage that well. So that would be my advice. Focus on what you're doing right now, and good things will happen down the road.
All right, we're going to finish off with some lightning round questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
These are super serious. So,
okay.
What is your favorite TV show to unwind from work? Oh. What do you watch?
I should be able to answer that quickly, but I don't watch a lot. I watch Netflix. Like okay. I'll flip through Netflix.
So what's a show that you watch over and over again, like The Sopranos or something?
Well, I love The Sopranos. It's been a few years, but that was during my scouting years, and rushed to a hotel to get to. Hotel has HBO, so you can watch this week's episode of Sopranos. I really don't have one. I hate to say that, but I don't have a show that I wind down
All right.
to.
That's your job for this season.
White noise in the background is kind of what it is for me. I fall asleep. I mean, if I lay down, I'm out within 5 minutes.
All right, you're one of those. All right, well, that's for next season. If we interview you next season and you don't have a show.
I'll have to get a show.
Yes, all right. What is a song on your playlist? What kind of music are you listening to?
Well, I like a lot of different music, but I love U2. I
Okay.
mean, I listen to U2 all the time. The other one, I think they sound like U2. The Verb. I
Yeah.
listen to the Verb. I like the Verb. So I'm U2. I actually went to watch Dave Matthews Friday night.
They're great.
That was a great concert. So it's more in that late '80s, early '90s genre. I love Pearl Jam. Yeah. So I'm more more in my high school and college years. All those types of bands. The grunge stage, I guess, is what it was.
Those have all stood the test of time.
They have. They're awesome.
Yeah.
I was embarrassed though that Dave Matthews. They didn't play all of their classics, so I was left a little disappointed, So, but they were great.
Yeah.
I mean, they played for about 3 hours. They were awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they played. They went and went and went. It was great.
If you could play an instrument, what would you play?
Well, I actually played the piano a little bit as a kid, and I wish I had continued.
Okay.
I really enjoy it. Like, I can listen to people play the piano all the time. Actually, when we had Danny Duffy could play the piano, and it was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could scout yourself, what would you have said about yourself as a
As
player?
a player?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. I could catch and throw. I thought I could hit at the time, but looking back, I couldn't hit at all. So that was the biggest
You just
problem.
said, give up, kid.
Yeah, that was, and you know what? I had a scout, a longtime scout, actually just passed away, Don Kohler. When I was scout, he worked for the Major League Scouting Bureau, which is not in existence anymore. I'm sorry. He gave me my scouting report from when he saw me in high school, and that was kind of neat to see.
Yeah.
But the bat grade was a little low. The catch and throw was fine.
There you go.
Yeah.
What is your favorite movie, baseball movie or other movie?
Well, Bull Durham.
Yes.
It's hard not to like Bull Durham. And again, that was right, when I was in college and going to NC State, going over to Durham Athletic Park was kind of a neat thing. The old park, now they have a new park there. But Bull Durham is a classic and hard not to like.
Yeah.
I always tried to debate with my boys, at what age can I let them watch Bull Durham? Because there's a few things in there. But what I found out is when I let them watch it, they had already seen it like 5 or 6 times, so they were ahead of me anyway.
There you go. They were trying to pull one over on you. Sounds about right. If there's any player, living or dead, that you could chat with, pick their brain, who would that be?
Well, again, I had the opportunity to do this, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. So growing up in Philadelphia, Mike Schmidt was my favorite player.
Okay.
So the big debate at the time was Mike Schmidt or George Brett a better player. And actually one of my best friends was a Royals fan, and we had this debate all the time. And when you go back and look at their career numbers, it's incredible how close their numbers are. Like RBIs are off by like 1.
Yeah.
Schmidt's got more home runs. George has got a much higher batting average and base hits. So we were the Phillies opener about 10 years ago, home opener, and George and Mike threw out the first pitch, and I got to spend the day listening to those two talk in the box, and that was like the highlight of my career.
Yeah.
To listen to George talk about how great Mike was, and Mike was talking about how great George was, and they are completely different personalities. So I didn't get a chance to talk specifically to Mike, but I got a chance to listen to him talk, and that was awesome.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What is your go-to meal? If you are coming home, had a good day, had a bad day, what do you want to eat?
I'm a steak guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I love steak, ribeyes in particular.
All right.
So I and they're easy. It's one thing I can cook. I can throw a steak on a grill and cook a pretty good steak.
All right, sounds good. We'll have you do that next time.
Okay.
You'll come to us with a TV show, and you will cook us all steaks.
Okay,
You
got
heard
it
it here first, everyone.
You got it.
Thank you so much, JJ, for being our guest today. We're so excited for Royals baseball in 2023.
Now we are too. I think we got an exciting team that's going to really make some great strides this year, and I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This has been The Homestand, the official podcast of the Kansas City Royals. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to your podcast. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button because we've got episodes coming your way. We're so excited for it, and we can't wait to see you next time.